My friends, today I want to speak to you about something that has the power to transform your life, something that can bring peace to your troubled soul and deliver you from the weight of worry. We all face trials, burdens, and moments when it seems as if the world is caving in around us. But in those moments, there's a divine truth that has the power to sustain us. Leave it in God's hands and watch what happens. Now, I know what you may be thinking. That sounds good in theory, but how can I really trust God with everything I'm going through? How do I release my fears, my doubts, my struggles into His care? How do I truly leave it in His hands? These are fair questions, my friends, because the truth is that it's not always easy to surrender. We live in a world that pushes us to take control, to act with our own strength, to fix things on our own. But today, I invite you to consider a different way, a better way. It all starts with a simple yet profound decision, the decision to trust. To trust that the one who created the heavens and the earth, the one who knows the number of hairs on your head, the one who has seen every moment of your life, is fully capable of taking care of your needs. The Bible tells us in the book of Psalms that God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. When you leave it in God's hands, you are acknowledging that there is a power greater than your own. You are surrendering control and placing your life, your problems, and your future into the hands of the one who has never failed and never will. But why does this matter so much? Why should we leave it in God's hands? Friends, when we hold on to our problems, when we refuse to let go, we are carrying a burden we were never meant to bear. We were never intended to carry the weight of the world on our shoulders. It was never God's plan for us to struggle alone, to fight these battles by our own strength. Jesus himself said in the Gospel of Matthew, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." What a beautiful promise. How often do we find ourselves weighed down by the worries of this life, by the fears of what might happen, by the anxiety over circumstances that seem beyond our control. And yet Jesus offers us something greater, rest. Rest that comes when we place our trust in Him. Rest that comes when we leave it in His hands. But how do we begin to trust Him with everything? It starts with faith. Faith is not simply believing in God in the abstract. It is choosing to believe in His promises, even when life seems uncertain. Faith is choosing to trust God in the midst of the storm, to believe that He is working even when we cannot see it. It is not always easy, but the more we exercise our faith, the more we experience His peace. Leaving it in God's hands doesn't mean that we sit idly by and do nothing. No, God has given us minds to think, hands to work, and hearts to serve. But leaving it in God's hands means that we do everything with the understanding that God is the ultimate source of our strength, wisdom, and guidance. We do our part, but we trust God to do what we cannot do. We make our plans, but we surrender them to His will. And as we do so, we begin to witness the power of God at work in ways we never imagined. One of the most powerful examples of leaving it in God's hands comes from the life of Abraham. We read in the book of Genesis that Abraham was promised by God that he would be the father of many nations. But there was a problem. He and his wife Sarah were unable to have children. The years went by, and still there was no child. But God had made a promise, and He is faithful to fulfill His promises. When Abraham was 100 years old and Sarah was 90, they were still childless. Yet God, in His perfect timing, allowed Sarah to conceive, and she bore a son, Isaac. Can you imagine how difficult it must have been for Abraham to wait so many years, to trust in God's promise despite the odds? But Abraham did not try to make it happen on his own. He trusted that God would fulfill his word. And in the end, this is the kind of trust we are called to have. We may not always understand why things happen the way they do, but we can trust that God's timing is perfect. We can trust that he knows what is best for us. Leaving it in God's hands means surrendering our timetable, surrendering our desires, and trusting that God's plan is far better than anything we could orchestrate ourselves. But there are times, my friends, when it feels especially difficult to let go, when the weight of our problems feels overwhelming, when the future seems uncertain, when the pain seems unbearable. In those moments, we are tempted to take matters into our own hands, to try to fix everything ourselves. But this is when it is most important to remember the words of the Apostle Paul. Cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. God cares for you, my friends. He cares deeply. No matter what you are going through right now, whether it's a financial struggle, a broken relationship, an uncertain future, or a deep sorrow, God cares. He sees you, he knows you, and he is able to handle whatever you place in his hands. One of the most beautiful things about leaving it in God's hands is that it brings peace that transcends understanding. The world may not understand why you have peace in the midst of chaos, but you know that it is because your trust is in the one who holds all things together. You know that even when things are falling apart, God is still in control, and he is working all things together for your good. As we walk through life, we will face challenges. We will experience heartache, disappointment, and loss. But in those moments, we have a choice. We can choose to hold on to our worries, to try to control everything, or we can choose to release it all into the hands of the one who is more than able to carry our burdens. When we do, we are not only trusting in God's ability, but also acknowledging his love and faithfulness. Friends, when we choose to leave it in God's hands, something miraculous happens. We begin to see the hand of God at work in our lives. We begin to experience peace in the midst of the storm, joy in the midst of trials, and hope even in the darkest moments. The more we trust God, the more we begin to see that he is faithful, that he is working behind the scenes, that he is making a way, even when it seems impossible. And so I encourage you today, whatever it is that you are carrying, whatever burden, whatever fear, whatever heartache, take a deep breath and leave it in God's hands. Surrender it all to him. Trust that he will handle it far better than you ever could. Watch what happens when you allow God to work in your life. Watch as he takes your broken pieces and turns them into something beautiful. Watch as he brings peace where there was once chaos, hope where there was once despair. Watch as he works all things together for your good and his glory. As you leave it in God's hands, may you experience the peace that passes all understanding, the joy that comes from knowing you are not alone, and the strength that comes from trusting in a God who is faithful, powerful, and loving. And remember, no matter what you face, no matter how difficult the road may seem, you are never alone. God is with you, and he will never leave you or forsake you. So leave it in his hands and watch what happens. My friends, as we continue to delve deeper into the idea of leaving our worries, fears, and struggles in God's hands, it's important to understand that this is not just a one-time decision, but a daily practice. It's a way of living, a mindset that we must cultivate day after day. The journey of faith is not always easy, and it doesn't happen overnight. But as we trust God, as we surrender more and more of ourselves into his care, we begin to witness his transformative power in our lives. You see, when we make the decision to leave it in God's hands, we are not simply giving up our struggles and waiting for everything to magically work out. It's not about passive resignation or complacency. No, leaving it in God's hands means that we actively choose to trust in His wisdom, His timing, and His perfect plan for our lives. It means that even when we can't see the way forward, we believe that God sees the bigger picture and that He is at work in ways we cannot yet comprehend. We are reminded in the book of Proverbs that trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. This is a powerful invitation to let go of our human limitations and place our full trust in the hands of the one who is limitless. Our understanding is finite, but God's understanding is infinite. We may not always understand why things are happening the way they are, but we can trust that God knows what He is doing. It's in these moments of uncertainty, when we feel lost and confused, that we are invited to lean not on our own understanding, but on the understanding of a loving Father who knows what is best for us. There is a peace that comes when we release the need to control every outcome. When we trust that God has a plan, even when we can't see it yet. In those moments, we begin to understand the meaning of true faith, the faith that says, I don't know how this will work out, but I trust that God will make a way. Perhaps one of the greatest obstacles to leaving things in God's hands is our tendency to rely on our own strength. We are often conditioned by society to be self-reliant, to take matters into our own hands, and to believe that we are the ones who must make things happen. This mentality can be deeply ingrained in us. And it's not easy to let go of the need for control. But I want to encourage you today to consider this. The more we rely on ourselves, the more we limit what God can do in our lives. God's ways are not our ways, and His thoughts are not our thoughts. When we lean on our own understanding, we confine ourselves to what we know, to what we can comprehend. But when we surrender to God, when we place our trust in Him, we open ourselves up to His limitless possibilities. We allow Him to work in ways that we could never have imagined. This doesn't mean that we should be passive or avoid taking action. We are still called to do our part, to work diligently and to make wise decisions. But it means that we do all of these things with the understanding that we are not in control of the outcome. We do them with an open heart, trusting that God is leading us, guiding us, and working in our favor. There is something incredibly freeing about releasing the need to control every detail. When we hold on too tightly to the things of this world, we become anxious, fearful, and exhausted. But when we let go and trust God, we find rest. We find a peace that transcends the circumstances, a peace that doesn't depend on the answers or the solutions we are seeking. It depends on the trust that God is faithful, that He will not leave us or forsake us, and that He is working all things together for our good. As we learn to leave it in God's hands, we also begin to experience a deeper sense of intimacy with Him. Trust is the foundation of any relationship. And as we trust God with our lives, our fears, our hopes, and our dreams, we draw closer to Him. We begin to see His faithfulness in new ways. We begin to feel His presence more tangibly. And we begin to understand that God is not distant or far off, but that He is deeply involved in every aspect of our lives. This deep trust in God's care and provision is reflected throughout Scripture. We see it in the life of King David, who, in the midst of his trials, continually declared his trust in God's faithfulness. In the book of Psalms, David wrote, The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. David knew that even when life was difficult, he could trust God to provide for him, to lead him, and to guide him. God's care for his people is not passive, it is active and personal. When we leave it in God's hands, we are entrusting our lives to the hands of the Creator, who loves us more than we can fully understand. And as we entrust our lives to him, we experience his provision in ways we never could have imagined. Now let us consider one more aspect of leaving it in God's hands, the reality of his timing. One of the greatest challenges we face in the Christian life is waiting. We live in a world that values instant gratification. We want answers now. We want solutions now. We want everything fixed immediately. But God's timing is often very different from our own. God does not operate on our timeline. He does not respond to our requests according to our schedule. And this can be difficult to accept, especially when we are in the midst of a struggle or trial. But it is in the waiting that our faith is deepened. It is in the waiting that we learn to trust God's timing, to wait patiently for his perfect plan to unfold. And when the time is right, God will act. His timing is always perfect, even if we don't understand it at the moment. In the meantime, we are called to wait with faith, to wait with hope, and to wait with expectation. We wait knowing that God is working behind the scenes, even when we cannot see it. We wait knowing that he is preparing something far better than we could ever ask for or imagine. The Apostle Paul, in his letter to the Romans, reminds us that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. This promise holds true in every circumstance. Whether we are waiting for an answer, waiting for healing, or waiting for direction, we can trust that God is working for our good. Even when we cannot see it, he is working. Leaving it in God's hands is an act of surrender, but it is also an act of faith. It is a declaration that we trust God to do what we cannot do, that we believe he is faithful to fulfill his promises, and that we are willing to wait for his perfect timing. So today, as you reflect on the struggles, fears, or burdens you may be carrying, I encourage you to release them into the hands of the one who is able to handle them. Trust him. Surrender your worries. Surrender your plans. Surrender your desires. And leave it all in God's hands. Watch what happens as you do. Watch as he moves in ways that you never imagined. Watch as he brings peace, healing, and transformation into your life. Watch as you experience the love and faithfulness of God in ways that fill your heart with joy and hope. When you leave it in God's hands, you are placing your trust in the one who knows you better than you know yourself, the one who loves you with an everlasting love, the one who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine. And as you do, you will begin to see that in God's hands, everything is possible. Everything. So trust him, my friends. Leave it in his hands and watch what happens. As we continue in this journey of learning to leave it in God's hands, there's something truly remarkable that happens when we make this choice. A transformation begins in our hearts. When we fully surrender our struggles, our fears, our burdens, and our desires to the Lord, something inside us shifts. We stop holding on to control so tightly, and in its place, a sense of peace and confidence takes root. That peace doesn't come from the circumstances around us, nor does it come from our own efforts. It comes from the quiet assurance that we are not alone. We are not in this by ourselves. The Creator of the universe is with us, guiding us, and working all things for our good. Now, this peace is not always immediate. It may take time. There will still be moments of doubt, moments of uncertainty, and moments when we wonder whether God is really hearing our prayers. But the more we place our trust in Him, the more we come to realize that God's love and care for us are steadfast and unchanging. Even when we can't feel His presence, even when it seems like nothing is happening, God is working behind the scenes in ways we may not see or understand. The Bible tells us that His ways are higher than our ways, and His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. And in those moments when we cannot understand why things are happening the way they are, we must remember that God sees the bigger picture. A story that exemplifies this trust in God is the story of Job. Job, a man who was described as righteous and blameless, faced unimaginable suffering. He lost his health, his wealth, and his family. Yet despite everything, Job continued to trust God. Even when he could not understand why such devastation had come upon him, he did not lose his faith. He said, "Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him." This was not a faith based on easy circumstances. Job's faith was deep, and it was rooted in his belief that no matter what he faced, God was still good. He was still sovereign, and even in his suffering, God had a purpose. Job's story teaches us that faith doesn't mean that everything will go according to our plans. It doesn't mean that we won't experience pain or hardship. It means that we trust that, in the end, God is in control. It means that we trust His plan even when we can't see the way forward. Job's life is a powerful testimony to the truth that no matter what happens, God is worthy of our trust. His ways are perfect, even when they seem incomprehensible. And through it all, God is present, working, loving, and restoring. The truth is, when we leave it in God's hands, we are also acknowledging that we don't have to have all the answers. This is often one of the hardest parts of trusting in God, being okay with not knowing. We live in a culture that values knowledge, that values certainty, and that values having the right answers. We want to understand everything. We want to control every outcome. And we want to know how everything will unfold. But leaving it in God's hands means that we are willing to embrace the unknown. It means we are willing to say, "Lord, I don't know how this will turn out, but I trust you." This kind of faith requires humility. It requires a recognition that we are not in control and that we can't do everything on our own. We have to admit that we need help, that we need guidance, that we need strength beyond our own. And when we do this, God's grace and power flow into our lives in ways that transform us. We begin to see that God is not a distant, detached force, but a personal and loving Father who cares for us deeply. He wants what is best for us, and He is working for our good, even when things don't make sense. When we leave it in God's hands, we also give Him permission to work in us and through us. This is another powerful aspect of trust. We are not just trusting God to fix our problems. We are also trusting Him to shape us, to refine us, and to transform our hearts. We are trusting that as we let go of our worries and fears, God will make us more like Christ. The process of surrendering to God is not just about seeing our circumstances change, it's about allowing God to change us. And in doing so, we begin to experience the fullness of the peace and joy that God promises to those who trust Him. It is important to remember that God's answers are not always what we expect. Sometimes we may pray for a specific outcome, and yet God answers in a way that is different from what we had hoped or imagined. This can be frustrating and even painful at times. But we must remember that God knows what is best for us. His answers are always rooted in His perfect love for us, and His plans are always better than our own. The Apostle Paul reminds us in Romans that God works all things together for the good of those who love Him. Even when it doesn't seem good in the moment, God is at work behind the scenes, orchestrating everything for our benefit. There is a deep peace that comes from knowing that God is sovereign over all things. He is not surprised by the challenges we face, and He is not caught off guard by the difficulties that arise in our lives. Everything is under His control. Nothing is beyond His reach. And when we trust in His sovereignty, we can rest in the assurance that He is working, even when we don't understand how or why. Another aspect of leaving it in God's hands is learning to be patient. In a world that is constantly rushing, it can be difficult to wait. We want things to happen now. We want our problems solved immediately. But God's timing is not our timing. And sometimes the waiting is where the growth happens, when we wait on God. When we trust Him with the timing, we are acknowledging that He knows what is best for us. We are trusting that He is working in ways that we cannot see, and that in His perfect timing, He will make all things right. During these waiting seasons, we must resist the temptation to take matters into our own hands. We must resist the urge to rush ahead and try to fix everything ourselves. God is never late. He is always right on time. And when we trust in His timing, we allow Him to do what only He can do. We allow Him to bring about the perfect solution at the perfect moment. We also need to understand that God's plan for us is often bigger than our own plans. We may think we know what is best for our lives, but God sees the bigger picture. His plans are far greater than anything we could ever imagine. And as we leave it in God's hands, we are saying, Lord, Your will be done, not mine. We are trusting that He will lead us to the place He has prepared for us, even if it's not where we expected to go. It is also important to remember that trusting God doesn't mean that we will never face challenges. It doesn't mean that everything will always go smoothly or that we will always get what we want. But what it does mean is that we can trust that God is with us in every season. He is with us in the valleys and on the mountaintops. He is with us in the struggles and in the triumphs. He is always present, always loving, and always faithful. Leaving it in God's hands is an act of surrender, but it is also an act of hope. It is choosing to believe that God is in control and that He is working for our good, even when the future seems uncertain. It is choosing to trust that He will lead us through every trial, every challenge, and every hardship. It is choosing to rest in the assurance that God's love for us is unshakable and that He will never leave us or forsake us. So I encourage you today, as you face whatever challenges or struggles lie before you, to leave it in God's hands. Trust Him with everything: your heart, your fears, your dreams, and your future. Believe that He is faithful. Believe that He is working behind the scenes, even when you can't see it. And as you do, you will begin to experience the peace and joy that come from knowing that you are not alone. God is with you, and He is more than able to handle whatever you place in His hands. Trust Him and watch what happens. As we continue to explore the power of leaving everything in God's hands, we must understand that true trust requires a heart fully surrendered. This doesn't mean we give up our responsibility to act or make decisions, but it does mean that our hearts are at peace with the understanding that God will guide our steps. When we trust in God, we stop obsessing over every little detail. We release the anxiety that comes with feeling like we have to control everything. It's a letting go of our need to manage outcomes and a step toward resting in the knowledge that He is at work in our lives, even when we don't see it. The truth is, many of us hold on to things because we fear the unknown, because we're afraid that if we don't stay in control, things might fall apart. But when we hold on so tightly, we miss out on the peace that God promises. It's when we surrender, when we give it all to Him, that we begin to experience freedom. We free ourselves from the heavy burden of self-reliance and embrace the rest that comes with fully depending on God. It's a paradox that the world does not understand. The more we let go, the more we receive. The more we release control, the more peace we find. Think of the words of Jesus when He invites us to come to Him with our burdens. He says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." This invitation is not just about physical rest. It's about emotional and spiritual rest. It's about knowing that God is carrying the weight of our worries and we don't have to carry them alone. It's about understanding that we don't have to strive or stress in our own strength because God's grace is sufficient. One of the most beautiful aspects of surrendering everything to God is that we are never left to navigate life's difficulties on our own. God doesn't ask us to handle everything alone. He promises to be with us, to comfort us, and to help us every step of the way. When we leave it in His hands, we are aligning ourselves with His perfect plan. And even when life seems difficult or uncertain, we can hold on to the truth that God is still in control, that He is still working behind the scenes for our good. There will be seasons in life when it's harder to trust than others. There will be moments when doubt creeps in and the temptation to take back control is strong. But it is in those moments, my friends, that we are called to remember that God is faithful. He has never failed us, and He never will. So let go, trust Him, and watch as He works miracles in your life. His timing is always perfect, His love never fails, and His plans for you are always. In conclusion, leaving everything in God's hands is not just a momentary decision, but a continual practice of faith. It is an act of surrender, a choice to trust God's wisdom, His timing, and His plan for our lives. When we choose to let go of control and place our worries, fears, and dreams into His hands, we open ourselves up to experience a peace that surpasses understanding. It's in surrendering that we find true freedom, knowing that God is at work even when we can't see it. As we walk through life's challenges, we are reminded that God is faithful and that His love is unshakable. His ways are higher than our ways, and His understanding far exceeds our own. When we trust Him completely, we don't just receive answers to our prayers, but we grow deeper in relationship with Him. We find strength, comfort, and assurance that we are never alone. So leave it in God's hands. Release your burdens, your worries, and your plans, and watch what happens as He moves in ways that are beyond what we can imagine. He is trustworthy, and He is more than capable of handling whatever we entrust to Him. Let go and allow Him to guide you, knowing that His perfect love and His perfect timing will never fail you. Trust Him, and you will witness His power, His peace, and His presence in your life in ways that will transform you from the inside out.